Hi, Assalamualaikum. I am Harith Firdouse. For a start, I would like to appreciate the presenting group by offering credits on their comprehensive elaboration on gene editing and CRISPR technology. We also find their presentation informative as they have gone through many aspects. However, we would also like to provide and offer constructive comments for their unstandardized slide template and citation style. Several points were redundant, and in certain parts, the audio was not clear. Last but not least, the slide was considered too long and kind of wordy for the audience to understand. All in all, we would like to convey our appreciation for their input. The stance of the presenting group was not clearly mentioned, but owing to a number of ethical issues, most of them are against He-Jiangkui's action. Germline genome editing should not be totally banned, as such action would disrupt its potential development for therapeutic use in the future. It also shouldn't be completely permissible to be applied immediately, as the treatment bears too many risks at the moment. Until further research is done, our group agrees that CRISPR or germline editing technology should be halted so as to reduce unintended mutation. We do not entirely agree with completely prohibiting nor permitting CRISPR technology. For now, however, there should be a halt on CRISPR technology.
Why did he consider to work with HIV in the first place? It is known that in China there is discrimination and stigma of disability. For example, they said that child with genetic defects reflects moral failing of the parents. Parents with disabled children also reported frequent discriminatory behaviors from others, and public schools refuse to accept the children. Specifically in China, it has low prevalence of HIV, which leads to lower tolerance and greater fear of having HIV among the community. Concerning Chinese attitude toward gene editing, a 2018 survey had shown that there is high percentage of willingness among participants to get gene editing to treat genetic diseases. Majority also support gene editing for research and clinical use. It is believed that due to social pressure, Chinese public tend to be more favorable toward human enhancement, including genome editing. Regarding social and cultural acceptance in Malaysia, a study in 2016 had shown that the use of human embryonic stem cells is seen as controversial since embryonic cell lines are extracted and marries the embryo itself. They consider the embryo as having equal moral status to fully developed human, leading to the higher level of moral concerns and low acceptance for human application. Higher education level also has been associated with higher support for utilization due to their greater knowledge about this technology. However, it becomes critical when religious view is taken into account. Religious people such as Muslims, Orthodox Christians, and Catholics has objected the use and consider it as ethically wrong.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Previously, the presenting group did mention about an alternative way of preventing mother-to-child transmission of HIV. So I would like to give further explanation regarding this matter and try to relate with our study. Basically, HIV is a virus that can attack the body's immune system. Currently, there are no effective cure exists for HIV. Once you get infected, it will remain in your body for your entire life. Nevertheless, HIV medicine can be used to slow or prevent progression of the disease. That is why early diagnosis is very important. Next, how HIV is transmitted. In general, transmission of HIV occurred when certain body fluids of HIV-positive patient made a contact with mucous membrane or damaged tissue or directly injected into the bloodstream of another person. AIDS caused by HIV is not a hereditary disease, but an infected mother can pass the virus to her unborn child during pregnancy, during delivery, and through breast milk feeding.
This presentation will be focusing on HIV statistics in babies. This is an additional information that was not clearly stated by the previous group. According to UNICEF, which is an organization that provides humanitarian and developmental aid for children worldwide, stated that approximately 150,000 children aged around 0 to 9 years old were affected by HIV, that bringing up the total number to 1.1 million of patients. On the bright side, even though there are still HIV cases, the number are declining due to the effort being taken as a preventive measure to prevent mother-to-child transmission of HIV. By means, there are other alternatives that are safer and reliable to be used to prevent HIV infection.
So, what the parents can do to prevent mother-to-child transmission? Firstly, they need to take HIV medications such as antiretroviral therapy, ART, and pre-exposure prophylaxis PrEP. Antiretroviral therapy should be taken by HIV-positive parents to reduce viral load and reduce the risk of transmitting the virus to their partner. On the other hand, pre-exposure prophylaxis PrEP should be taken by HIV-negative parents to reduce their risk of getting infected by their positive partner. Next is about cesarean delivery. HIV-positive mother does not necessarily need to deliver via C-section. They require C-section only when the viral load of the mother exceeds 1,000 copies per ml. Lastly, HIV-positive mother should avoid breastfeeding the baby at all costs. So in this case study, if the parents strictly follows these preventive measures while consulting the doctors, they will have less than 2% risk of transmitting HIV to their future children instead of cooperating with He Jiankui in journal editing.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Next, I'll be talking about a point that was not highlighted by the presenting group last week, which is regarding the CCR5 gene and the CCR5 receptor. We believe that this point is very interesting to be discussed for the case study. As we are all aware, the primary objective of his experiment was to reduce the susceptibility of an individual towards HIV through germline gene editing. So the specific gene that was intentionally altered was the CCR5 gene, which encodes for the CCR5 receptor. So out of all the different genes in the body, why did he target this gene? This was because of the vital role it played in the entry of HIV into the host cell. So in order to enter the host cell, the HIV must first engage with the CD4 antigen, and secondly to the CCR5 receptor, and then it is allowed to internalize into the host cell. So the CCR5 is undoubtedly the main HIV co-receptor that is involved in the virus entry and cell-to-cell spread. That is why the CCR5 is a key target for HIV therapy and prevention research. So now we know the important roles that the CCR5 plays in HIV infection. So is there any proof that change in the CCR5 gene can provide resistance towards HIV infection? Yes, there is. There are certain communities worldwide that has a reduced or abolished expression of the CCR5 receptor naturally. This is because of the mutation known as the delta 32 mutation. This mutation causes the deletion of the receptor sequence that prevents exposure of the CCR5 receptor on the cell surface. Consequently, homozygous delta 32 individuals are substantially but not completely resistant to HIV infection. Besides altering the CCR5 gene, there are also alternative strategies for us to target the CCR5 gene, such as using small molecule inhibitors, chemically modified ligands, anti-CCR5 antibodies, and drugs such as rapamycin and statin. Although they are all still in research, they have shown positive results in combating HIV infection.
So, besides from the experiments itself, what is wrong with what He Jiankui and his colleagues or his partners did? So, we can look it from an ethical point of view. He breached many ethical regulations, and from the case, there were a few problems with it. The number one is the problems with the informed consent process itself. The next, second is the legitimate ethics review, and the final problem from an ethical point of view is the breaching of the Chinese and international ethical conventions. So first, the consent form itself that he obtained from the participants had many problems. First off, it was 23 pages in full English. This made it hard for the participants to understand all the terms and conditions of the experiment, and it gave He Jiankui an advantage over their participation. From the consent form, it was said that all the costs will be paid by the project team except for exceeding budget. This exceeding budget will be paid by the participants themselves. However, if the participants fail to pay the exceeding budgets or late or are late in their payment, they will be fined 100,000 yuan, which is problematic in of itself, because these requirements to pay the expenses and the burden that it would have brought to the participants violated the freedom to withdraw from the experiment, thus making the participants hard to reject the experiment if anything breaches their consent. Thus, this experiment, in ethical point of view, violates the principle of voluntariness.
Apart from the consent form, the previous group also did not mention about illegitimate ethics review. Firstly, her Jankui did not receive approval from registered committee. The Ethics Committee of Shenzhen Harmony Care Women and Children's Hospital, which her Jankui got the approval for his research, was not a registered committee. To become a registered committee, the healthcare institution should register with their professional registration authorities within 3 months after the establishment of the Ethics Committee. Secondly, the research was done before received approval from Ethics Committee. Why it is important to have approval from Ethics Committee is because to promote high ethical standards in conducting the research for health. And thirdly, this research was also not registered at the Medical Research Registry and Management System. The third ethical issue is this research had breaching the Chinese and international ethical conventions on human gene editing. For Chinese Ethical Convention, the former Ministry of Health in 2003 had stipulated that genetic manipulation of human gametes, zygotes and embryos for reproductive purposes is prohibited. So He Jiankui's research clearly goes against this. For International Ethics Convention, this global discussion was named as International Summit on Human Gene Editing. This discussion was involved 500 people from Chinese Academy of Science, UK Royal Society and the US National Academy of Science. And one of their agreement about the policies on human gene modification is the researcher will be called for a moratorium on the clinical research until and unless the research are safe to be applied and there is broad societal consensus about the proposed application. So here shows that his Jiankui research was not comply with this regulation.
Into the Islamic perspective on the cases. So first thing first, I would like to recap what have been presented by the present group last week. So in the Islamic perspective, when we are going back into the first purposes of the HGNQ in doing this research, he used the CRISPR gene editing system in order to edit the DNA of the human embryo so that the baby will be less susceptible to the HIV. In Islam, it is highly encouraged for us in order to prevent the transmit of the potential fatal genetic disease. And this is in line with one of the elements that have been stated by the Maqasid Sharia, whereby the preservation of life, whereby in these cases, HGNQ would like to prevent the genetic disease. But however, the process of dealing with this issue cannot be looking at only from one side of the angle, as it may cause the arisal of the ethical concern. Okay, so now we'll be looking at the ethical concern that has been raised due to the HGNQ experiment, which are the first one is safety and efficacy. So the safety and efficacy are among the main aspects that has been considered by the Muslim scholar when they are deliberating about the ethics of the technology from the Islamic perspective. So the risk and the uncertainty of this technology of the CRISPR-Cas9 that have been yet fully overcome or unresolved may cause a more greater harm, whereby in Islam we cannot prevent the harm by using the same or a greater harm. So thus this technology is considered unsafe to be used in a human clinical trial. This is in line with the basic principle in Islam, preventing harm take precedence over securing the benefit. So the second is regarding the human dignity. So in this case, the concern regarding the moral status of embryo used in the germline gene editing has also been raised. However, principle of preservation of the human dignity can be argued as consideration should be highlighted, mostly on the aim and the procedure that involve the human germline gene editing. Thus, if the research of the germline gene editing is mainly for medical purposes, so the human dignity will not be arise in Islamic perspective as long as it follow as what has been stated by the Sharia.
The third ethical concern is tampering with God's creation. Some view that scientists play with God and take control over the humanity. Next, human genetic enhancement from this technology have the possibilities of improving human traits beyond the normal capacities. Does this influence human to chase for perfection and get rid of unwanted traits for the sake of common goods? With the advancement of CRISPR gene technology, do scientists play with God? There are 3 points of justification. The first one, CRISPR method does not change the nature in reality, as the Prophet ﷺ said, Allah has written whom He is going to create till the day of resurrection. Next, alteration in the germline cannot change the God's creation, as He said no one can change the creation of God, so the pattern on which He has made mankind, no change in the work of Allah. Those who believe that through medical technology we can create and control the world, in fact, they should aware that Allah is the creator of all things. Dayan has concluded, if CRISPR-Cas9 method inclines toward evil, it can be acceptable in case where an atypical germline sequence can affect the next generation, which is indeed a great evil. The lesser of evil is preferred over the greater one with purpose to enhance human health and living standard. For curing minor disease, if it causes equal infirmity, which is weakness, or greater, should be rendered forbidden, because harm cannot be removed by harm. However, in severe cases, it is acceptable in the basis of necessity, because a greater harm can be removed by lesser one.
We all know that He Jiankui has been punished by Chinese court alongside with his 2 colleagues, but the presenting group did not mention this question. Wait a minute, why does He Jiankui get punished at the first place?
It's all about ethics. Before going into detail, let's have a look at 4 golden rules, or the principle of medical ethics proposed by Tom L. Bushong and James F. Childress. Okay, first, the autonomy. The individual or patient should be acknowledged and respected to decide and act according to their beliefs and values. Okay. Second is beneficence, which means the promotion of welfare. Islam also promotes this value, such mentioned in Surah Ali Imran, chapter number 3, verse number 160, which is also illustrated as ihsan. Okay, the third is non-maleficent. At any situation, the physician has to avoid the risk of harm to the patient itself. Okay, the fourth and finally, fulfilling human right, which is to ensure fairness and equity to fulfill the right of all actors in any given scenario. So, between all of this value, He Jiankui has violated 2 of the value, which is autonomy, because earlier Hamizuddin has explained that He Jiankui has forced the patient to pay the treatment and penalty if the treatment is cancelled. This will affect the decision making by the patient itself. Next, He Jiankui also could not confirm if he could avoid the unintended mutation risk to the patient if the procedure is failed.
Next, Nik Zahirah will explain about the Muslim expert opinion about this.
Genome editing technology considered impermissible as whole? The answer is no. Muslim scholars from Gulf countries like Oman, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia yield the most permissive stance regarding genome editing. The purpose of editing should be the main top priority consideration for ethical judgment. It is permissible according to the Muslim scholars, firstly in the search for beneficial knowledge, we call as ilmun nafi'. This fact supported by the strong evidences from Quranic ayah in chapter 29 verse 20, in which Allah SWT said that, travel throughout the earth and see how He has originated the creation. Then God will bring the next life into being. Surely God has power over everything. Other than that, Allah SWT mentioned in chapter 20 verse 50, Auzubillahiminasyaitanirrajim. Our Lord, He is who gave to each thing its due shape and nature, then guided it right. Besides, the purpose of editing is permissible when the medical treatment tadawi become the main intention for genome editing to move from research to clinical application. This fact can be supported by the authentic hadith of Sahih Bukhari. O servants of God, seek treatment because God never sent down a disease without sending down its treatment. However, in the case of Hadrian Q, who used the germline cells in genome editing, the mainstream position adopted by Muslim scholars is that, first, no principal opposition in editing germline cells. Other than that, it should be employed in the clinical setting only in the case of necessity, such as when there is no presence of therapy. And thirdly, actually there is no harm in using this technology for research purposes or for tests on animal. In other words, there is no one-size-fits-all moral judgment that views genome editing as a single block or indivisible as a whole. Therefore, for this time being, Muslim scholars say that germline genome editing should be halted due to issues related to safety and efficacy. For example, the effect not only to the person who has the cells, but also to the offspring, and the long-term effect which need more cautious procedures.
So what are the impact of this case to biomedical research? Previously, the presenting group had mentioned that Hadrian's action had caused difficulty in getting research funds, but it's not only that, it also gives impact to the regulatory approval, especially in China. Firstly, China drafts regulation for emerging biomedical technologies. For example, the China's National Health Commission had drafted regulations on novel biomedical technologies, but this regulation only is not enough. The Chinese bioethicists plan to draft the recommended regulations on basis of comprehensive inquiry and debate for each emerging technologies, including genome editing. The next impact is that China enhances its ethics governance system into 3 levels. The first level is the National Medical Ethics Expert Committee that provides policy advice and also guides ethics review. And the second level is the Provincial Medical Ethics Expert Committees that guide, inspect, and assess work of ethical committees and also give trainings and consultation work. The third level is the local health administrative departments that supervise and also responsible for administration ethics review of biomedical research. In conclusion, we think that his action will totally oppose the regulation in conducting the research, including the ethical issues, national and also China regulation, and also from Islamic perspective. But we also believe that this case had opened up the side of importance of improving the research and also the technology in the future. So our stand is germline genome editing should not be totally banned, as its potential development for therapeutic use in the future could be disrupted. It is also should not be fully permissible to be used immediately because the treatment is too risky to be applied, but it should be halted due to its safety and efficacy issues. That's all from us. Thank you.